Hello, this is video 2 of our series on creativity and neuroscience. And I want to talk to you about a very important experiment that happened in 1975 by Colin Martindale. First of all, I need to differentiate for you the difference between associative thinking and analytic thinking. Now, associative thinking you will recognize as an artist immediately. It's a sort of thinking that is extremely rapid, so you can't account for how you get there. It's a sort of thinking that's full of metaphor because it's stirring many memories. And it's a sort of thinking that doesn't account for your personal sense of self. It doesn't have your beliefs and your attitudes. In fact, sometimes this thinking may shock you. On the other hand, analytic thinking is the sort of thinking we've learnt since we went to school. And it's got these characteristics. It's purposeful, logical, controlled, accountable, value-laden. It's got our values, beliefs and attitudes. And predictive. We are predictive animals, like a lab mouse who can be taught where its food is. We learn early to be predictive, so we get our rewards. In 1975, when Colin Martindale did his experiment, it was a very different time in thinking about behaviour. Francis Crick, that esteemed scientist, even said that it was an astonishing hypothesis to imagine that our behaviour and our emotions could be caused by neural activities. Colin Martindale was working at a time when it was believed that creative people buzzed with creativity inside their brains. And he was also working with EEG machines, which while they could track cortical activities, they could not track subcortical regions of the brain. He gave both groups the same tests, an IQ test and a creativity test, which was a word association test. So here's the level of excitement, and here's a number of nodes that were reached in the brain. And this is for the non-creatives. And it's the IQ test. And what he found was that there were peaks and troughs in the level of excitement. For the creatives, he gave the same test. Again, the level of activity in the brain and the number of nodes that were reached. And he found very much the same, peaks and troughs. For the second test, the word association test, the creativity test, again, the level of excitement, and here, the number of nodes that were reached in the brain. And this was a creativity test. And this was a non-creatives. And here, the same sort of peaks and troughs. And he noticed that after a while, the brain activity ceased because no more nodes were activated. Now here is a vital difference. So this is the creative people doing the creative test. Again, the level of excitement. Again, the number of nodes that were reached in the brain. And what was dramatically different was what he noticed was the level of activation of excitement dropped below the level of the ability of the machines to measure it. And after a while, the excitement rose, again in peaks and troughs, and went much further into the brain, he thought, because more nodes were activated. So what is vital for us to notice as artists is this section of the graph. where they went into a stillness. I'm also going to draw you two bottles because I want to illustrate an aspect of Colin Martindale's experiment that's seldom talked about. And that's that when people went into that quiet space, they seemed to be increasing their sensitivity to everything, to sounds, to smells, to feelings, to textures. It seemed like they were subliminally responsive. And that's important for us artists. And here I come to the bottles. Because I'm going to draw a bottle and a jar. Rather badly. Here's the jar, here's the opening of the jar. And of course, not much can get in the neck of a narrow-necked bottle. And a lot more can get into an open jar. And what he seemed to be saying was that the creative people who went into that quietness became much more sensitive, whereas the non-creative people who didn't go in, they didn't receive all those sensations. And that's important to us as artists, is to be like this, because that's increasing our rich memories, our memory associations. The more we have flooding into our minds, the more memories we have to draw upon. Then came the widespread use of the fMRI machines that allowed people to peer into our brains. From the moment you stop thinking about the creative task consciously, a massive redistribution of the brain's resources is underway. In 2015, Arne Dietrich, one of the world's leading neuroscientists, published a book on how the brain works during creativity. So where the massive distribution of resources leaves is the prefrontal cortex, or most of it. And it seems an irony that the prefrontal cortex, which has been called by many the pinnacle of human evolution, because it's responsible for our purpose-driven thinking, the seat of our values, our attitudes, our executive function, as it's called. It seems an irony that art is created largely elsewhere. It's as if the pinnacle of human achievement, art, leaves the prefrontal cortex. And that's because art needs to be created without a purpose, without a plan, without ties to sensible, logical, predictive thinking. So in our meditation, with which we're going to end this video, I'd like you to let your gaze wander out over to the sea and allow anything to come into your mind. Let's again shut our eyes, soften our gaze, just concentrate on the breath, using open meditation as a portal to this free associative thinking.